Ladies and gentlemen, introducing to you Atul Banerjee. He has 30 years of experience in strategy, product development, and market analysis within healthcare and TMT. His services include market analysis, new market entry, and product strategy to global clients. His recent experience involves fundraising for startups and teaching at LBS and UCL. Mr. Bannerjee founded Transformative Health in 2003, an integrated health clinic offering conventional and complementary medical advice and information to patients and physicians for a range of indications. He has also co-founded ABE Strategy in 2006, a research and strategy consulting firm helping companies expand into new markets, find partners, and develop new products and services. In 2019 and 20, he was mentor for the London Business School course, The Entrepreneurial Age, helping international students learn about startups and raise funding from investors. He worked as case lecturer at the University College of London on their MBA program, and also as presenter at Brick Academy in India, teaching strategy and research. He has also been a member of the board of trustees for a charity, Food for the Brain Foundation, which aims to raise awareness for the importance of optimum nutrition in mental health. Today, Mr. Atul Banerjee will speak on the topic Basics of Business Strategy. His session will be followed by a Q&A session of around 20 minutes. Atul Banerjee, sir, we are extremely humbled to have you with us today. We are correctly looking forward to an excellent session with you. The podium is always
yours. Thank you so much. Thanks very much for that introduction. Just to make sure you can see my screen.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Excellent. So this is the contents. We're going to be talking about business strategy and why it's important and go through all the components of what makes a strategy. Just a snapshot about me. It's a very nice introduction. Thank you very much. On the right, you see some of the skills that I have from consulting to VC funding, developing business plans for some startups, and working for LBS and UCL. So I have corporate, startup, freelance, and academic experience. And those logos down there. So I've facilitated some war games in Texas and in across Europe for Novartis and Roche in the pharmaceutical side. The previous speaker mentioned Nokia. I consulted for them in Norway and also Telenor to devise their strategy. I spent some time in South Korea with Samsung and some time in America with Microsoft. So I've got a range of international experience. So what is business strategy? It's essentially an outline of the actions and decisions that a company plans to take to reach its goals and objectives. And so this image on the right I found from a company called TBR Strategy. It's quite a nice snapshot of all the different steps that you need to take and all the different components. I thought I'd just put it there so that you can take a look at it. So the strategy basically defines what a company needs to do to reach its goals. It also helps in hiring, in resource allocation. It helps different departments work together and make sure that every component of an organization is working together and aligned to the overall vision of the company. So let's just go to this slide here. This is my own structure of what an organization looks like. You've got suppliers coming in from the outside. You've got customers that you're dealing with. But internally, whether you have some of these departments merged or not, these are the essential functions, and you've got support functions that underlie it. So you want to make sure that a strategy, which could be at corporate level, it could be at business unit level, or departmental, or even within teams in a department, they all need to align with the company vision. So it optimizes both inter and intra-departmental efficiency. So just take a moment to have a look at this. As long as everything that you're doing within an organization is aligned to the overall strategy, then the company is going to be more efficient. So why is it important? On the right, you see a number of things that have been spelled out by other people. Basically, the point of having a strategy, it allows you to plan the steps to reach those business goals, which are the tactics that you're going to employ. It identifies strengths, capabilities, any competitive advantages that you have, but moreover, any gaps that you might have as well. It identifies competitive threats and any weaknesses. And of course, it optimizes all the resources that you have. in order to achieve your objectives. So how do you develop a strategy? What I'm not going to do in this presentation is go through all of the different models that you get taught in business school, but I will mention a few. This is one of them, Mintzberg's 5 Ps. And these 5 Ps are plan, ploy, pattern, position, and perspective. And you see in the grey ellipses there, the types of models that people can use to help in devising a strategy using one of those approaches. So Mintzberg came up with this model of different types of approaches to develop a strategy. A strategy as a plan basically involves brainstorming and analysis. I'm sure you all have heard of the PESTEL model, SWOT analysis, and so on. Strategy as a ploy is a plot to disrupt, discourage, and influence competitors and customers. And for this, you can use scenario analysis, impact analysis, game theory. So look these up and you'll find out what they're all about. Strategy as a pattern is looking at your past organizational behavior as a predictor for future behavior. So you look at your core competencies, your USPs, and you analyze what the key strengths are. Strategy as a position. So you look at the marketing position, your competitive advantage. You can use Porter's diamond analysis, 5 forces. And finally, strategy as a perspective, talking about culture, whether you're risk-taking or whether you're much more into data analysis. And cultural web, Congress models are a couple of those examples. So the components. This is something that I use for developing pitch decks for people starting up their business ideas. So the entrepreneurial edge at London Business School is all about helping people who are thinking about raising funds for a startup. And in the pitch deck, they have to think about all of these different components. And what I've done is just put on the sides there some of the strategic models that you might come across if you're in a business school. So vision and mission, you're looking at your positioning statement. Core values, it's your value proposition. Market landscape, competitive landscape, these are things you'll be familiar with. These are the traditional models in strategic analysis. And all MBAs will be teaching PESTEL, 5 forces, strategic space analysis, gaming, 4 corners, and so on. When you're looking at core competencies, you're probably looking at the internal resources and looking at value chain analysis. And then you come up with all the different options that you might have. And so you start looking at scenario analysis and other models as well. You have to develop a business model, which will help you understand whether your idea is viable or not. So you have to come up with a cash flow and a revenue forecast and understand the costs, understand all the different components in your business. And there's something called a business model canvas, which is quite useful for that. Part of the developing a strategy, of course, is understanding all of your resources, not just human, but financial and technological and so on. A couple of other things to mention is culture and diversity, and I'll come on to that a bit later on. Once you've got all this plan in place, you have to measure to make sure that you are achieving your goals. And finally, you have to come up with an implementation plan. So let's go through these. So vision and mission. Now, what's the difference? Some people put mission first and then vision and then the other way around. But basically, they work hand in hand. A mission statement is a roadmap for the company's vision statement. So vision is what it wants the company to be. And a mission statement clarifies what the company wants to achieve, who they want to support and why they want to support them. So here's something from Tesla. Their vision is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. And the mission is to create the most compelling car company of the 21st century by driving the world's transition to electric vehicles. Here's Amazon's. Hopefully everyone knows these brands. That's why I've chosen them. Amazon's vision: to be Earth's most customer-centric company where customers can find and discover anything they might want to buy online. Mission: we strive to offer our customers the lowest possible prices, the best available selection, and the utmost convenience. So you can decide yourself whether these companies are true to their vision and mission. But when it comes to your own, that's what you have to think about. What do you want to be and what do you want to achieve? So core values, let's have a look at this. Core values sits underneath the vision and mission, and basically it allows you to plan the key steps to reach your business goals. It identifies strengths, capabilities, competitive advantages, threats, weaknesses, and so on. So here are the core values for Starbucks. I've underlined the keywords here. Create a great work environment, embrace diversity, have the highest standards of excellence, develop enthusiastically satisfied customers, contribute to communities and the environment, and recognize that profitability is essential. That's all interesting. I thought the last one was very interesting, actually. And here's Procter & Gamble. And rather than read all the details, I just highlight the key things that they're looking at: people, integrity, leadership, trust, ownership, passion for winning. And you can core value you're interested in and type in a search engine, you'll find what they are, which is kind of interesting to look at. Now, the market landscape is a really important part of a pitch deck or a business strategy. It's really understanding what are the components out there, what's going to affect your own business. It identifies the key players. You can classify them by different characteristics, whether they're type of organization, target customer, revenue, market share. And of course, why would you do this? You need to develop your corporate strategy based about learning about the market that you're in and to understand the trends and the industry dynamics, but most of all, to understand if there are any gaps, because that provides you opportunities. So these are the different things that you do in market analysis. You identify the size, your target customers, any trends, the competitors you're up against, what services and products they have, and how much that market is worth. And for a startup, this is really important because it tells investors whether it's worth investing in this startup or not. What do you actually use? So here are a couple of other models you're familiar with: PESTLE, the 5 forces, all to understand the industry dynamics. Strategic space analysis to understand how different competitors play in this field. Strategic gaming, this is something I've done a fair amount, and there's different types of gaming. So if it's further out, you're looking at scenario analysis. If you know who your competitors are and you want to analyze them a bit more, then strategy workshop. If you really want to delve into how your direct competitors will react to your own strategy, then you conduct a war game. Nobody likes the term war game anymore, so we call it strategy game. So this is all about how do you compare versus the market and your competitors. Competitive landscape is another very important area. Probably people don't spend enough time on this, but this is an area where I've spent quite a bit of time across the world. Competitive analysis, you identify who you're competing against, you analyze the products and prices and services, figure out the strengths and weaknesses, you try to uncover their strategies and how you would react to changes, how they would react. And of course, you have a look at the trends in the overall market as well. And there's different models that you can use: strategic group analysis, perceptual mapping. These all you can look up. And these are actually utilized in real life when we're dealing with clients around the world. Here's a couple of examples of a couple of students who presented a competitive landscape analysis of their own company versus some competitors. The left-hand side is a collaboration platform for universities. And so this person was competing with Oracle and SAP, PeopleSoft, and a couple of others. And the one on the right is a fashion retail startup competing against the likes of Nike and Legend and so on. So let's look at core competences. What are we talking about here? You want to identify where you have a competitive advantage in your own business. Things like your people, perhaps, if you're a consulting firm, technology, brand, operations, culture, business model, assets. Any of these could be a core competence for you. Now, the value chain analysis you see there is one way of analyzing not just yourself, but somebody else. If you're actually trying to identify what the core competences are of a competitor, that's the kind of model you would use. If you're trying to do this for yourself, then if you can see that on the bottom right, you identify all of your competencies, you describe them, you rank them in terms of importance and how competitors can copy it, how defensible it is, and what the strength is. And that's a good way of really identifying where your advantages are and where your gaps and weaknesses are as well. So once you've done this, you then think about your options. It's not just about having one strategy, actually. You can come up with multiple strategies. It's all about having a plan for the successful achievement of your goals. And strategic options are alternatives to react to changes in the external environment. So you can conduct an internal and external SWOT. You have a number of options which you can evaluate with values and if they align to the mission. You can then look at likely response to actions or changes in the environment and what different scenarios would mean. And you continue to look for better options even if you've chosen a particular strategy. And that's the whole idea of continuous improvement and evaluation, Japanese term called Kaizen. So on the right there, you see a number of different models that consulting firms use, and you can look them up. This one I quite like, scenario analysis. This one I've used when people have been asking about what do we do if this happens in the market? Or what do we do if this competitor does this? And these are the different types of things that you can do over a different time horizon. So you have a market forecasting, economic forecasting if it's quite close. You can use Delphi method of getting qualitative feedback from experts in the industry. You can look at multiple scenarios, and further out, it becomes much more in terms of predictability. Now, the business model. So why would you have a business model? Of course, you have to forecast your revenue. You have to identify your costs. You have to see if it's profitable or not. This picture on the right is something called a business model canvas. It's a really good architecture to understand a company's business model with all the different components, the customers, value proposition, channels, the revenue streams, the cost base, and so on. And you can see here for LinkedIn and Airbnb, they've used this canvas to show how their business models are. But there are lots and lots of different types of business models, actually. So what I've done is shown you a few. There are more than this, but different types of business models. Franchise, multi-sided platform, e-commerce, you've got subscription, you've got consulting with McKinsey, blockchain, Bitcoin. Disintermediation was an interesting one for Tesla, which means that they farm out to third parties all of the different components. So take a look and you can identify the different logos, hopefully, and the types of different business models that they have. And there are more. And when a person is developing their idea for a startup, they also need to think about what kind of business model do they want to employ. Do they want to be an Uber aggregator or a customer e-commerce type of business? Peer-to-peer is an interesting one. Okay, let's look at resources now. So as I said, there are lots of different things that you need to look at in order to align each of these to the overall business strategy. Financial is an obvious one. You have to look at the amount of funds that you have, the venture capital, any loans that you might have, but also how much you're going to spend in marketing, branding, office, the web, people, other expenses, insurance, accounting, your IT infrastructure, raw materials, distribution, lots of different things depending on what your business is doing. You might have third parties that you have to think about, suppliers. Then you have your physical resources, the equipment that you have, inventory, buildings, manufacturing, infrastructure. Or you might be a virtual business. In the case of consulting firms, the virtual consulting firms that we have today, perhaps the only physical aspect is your own home office, given the new way of working. Human resources. So yes, of course, your employees and all the different departments. Intellectual is another one, the IP that you have, the brand, the patents, copyrights, partnerships, software, and so on. On the right there, you see, I don't know if it's clear enough, but IBM by far outstrips all the others with over 9,000 patents. This is from 2018. Then you have Canon and GE, Intel, Alphabet or Google, LG. And so you can see the number of patents that these companies have had. And finally, digital resources. So the money spent on online, mobile, social media presence. Okay, culture and diversity. This is the big thing now. I've been talking to some friends who are very senior in consulting firms, actuarial firms, corporates, and diversity and culture is all the rage. So why is it important? Well, culture defines both your internal and external identity. It reflects your company's core values. It transforms your employees into advocates, if it's a good culture. And a strong culture helps to keep your best people. It transforms your company into a team and impacts performance and employee well-being. So culture is very important. I know, having gone from working in a large consulting firm like Accenture to a smaller firm like ZS Associates, at the time when I was there, it was very small, very different culture. And that had a massive impact on how we worked, how close we were with our colleagues and so on. But also then when I went into startups, that had a completely different culture, which I quite liked actually. Much more a case of everyone in it together, people wearing different hats, less of a competitive environment. Now, what's diversity? Now, I was looking into this, and McKinsey, Harvard, Forbes very recently have all written articles about the importance of diversity. Why? Because, well, they say it generates greater innovation and creativity, greater productivity. It provides a range of skills. It's more attractive for job seekers, and you end up with happier employees. Now, take a look at this picture on the right. Would you say that's diverse? You have a range of genders, a range of ethnic backgrounds. Something to bear in mind with diversity is that it's not all about how people look, actually. Say all of these people were employed into a team or a department of a company. But if they all went to the same type of school and the same type of university and studied the same type of degree, would you say they were diverse? Visually, perhaps, but in terms of the way they think. So I just wanted to highlight something called cognitive diversity, which is much more about hiring people who come from different backgrounds because of the way they think is different. And that means you have a team who are diverse and can offer different solutions and different ways of thinking to solve a problem. So just be aware of diversity being a tick box exercise rather than actual genuine cognitive diversity. Measurement is really important because without measurement, you don't know how well you're doing and whether you're achieving your objectives or not. So why would you measure? Assess where your business is strong, identify where it's weaker and why, identify any factors that can be improved, and of course, track progress. So these are things you would typically measure: your financial, cash flow, working capital, and so on, the profitability, gross profit, net profit, return on capital employed, your customers for sure, your sales, who's happy, who's not, what are their needs, how satisfied are they? Remember Starbucks core values, any new products that they need, presence on social media. These all need to be tracked. Just a point on customers. One of the companies I was working with was a film distribution company buying films from Bollywood. So they had contracts with the different studios in India and distributing it to the Indian community in the UK. And they were hoping to then expand to other countries. And they were spending a huge amount of money in marketing. And for a few months, that money was being spent, but no one could really figure out which avenue, which channel was performing. There were adverts on buses, adverts on billboards, there was digital marketing being spent, There was a mela being held so people could go and see the company's branding. It was only once they started tracking the spend and tracking which channels were producing sales that they could then adjust the marketing spend. So that's really important to as to where you're spending your money for VCs and for investors. Employees, that's an important one, and it seems to be a much more important thing for bigger organizations than smaller ones. Smaller ones is pretty obvious. In a startup, you're all in it together, and you kind of, if you're not rowing in the same direction in your little boat, you really don't go anywhere. For larger companies, they have to have a much more formal process of appraisal. So there are key performance indicators, staff meetings, and there's, of course, informal feedback as well. But don't forget competitors. You have to measure how your competitors are doing. You identify them. You benchmark yourself against them. You understand what products and services and prices they're offering. You have to have a look at who their customers are, what their competitive advantages are, conduct a SWOT analysis, and so on. Finally, on this strategy development, you have to have the implementation plan. So actually, how do you go about, once you've kind of gone through that whole process, how do you actually implement a strategy? On the right here is a diagram. It's a process from a company called Strategy to Execution, which I found quite interesting. But it essentially covers the areas that are important. So you need to align the plan with the vision, mission, and values of your organization. Then you assign an effective leadership team. You have to have the right people implementing this plan. You identify the roles and responsibilities so everyone is clear about what they're doing. You assign or allocate the appropriate finances. Make sure everyone is assigned the goals and the objectives, the metrics that they're going to be measured against, and any action items. You can see here on the bottom right how that can look. Communicate the plan. Sometimes the best plans fail because no one knows about it. Review and report on progress. Make strategic adjustments as necessary. This goes back to the Kaizen. That just because you have a plan written down and you've developed your strategy doesn't mean then you can close the door and go home. You have to constantly review whether the strategy is working and adjust it if necessary. Finally, develop a culture that supports the strategy. That comes down to whether things are working or not, whether goals are being achieved or not, and finding out the reasons why, and allowing people to own up to mistakes and correct them. So that's why culture is so important. So that's it, really. That's the basics of business strategy. I think I'll hand it over to the host and to see if there are any questions. And I can go back to answer any of them.
Hi, sure. That was a wonderful session.